and welcome back. Oh man, what a show, what a show. We have such an interesting guest today, and he brought an interesting guest. The two of them together are going to absolutely grab your attention. My name is Vin Dacquino. Our guests are Edward Lagarde and Karen Lagarde. And welcome. What a pleasure to have you here. Talk to me. Ed, I read your bio and it was fascinating. Tell me a little bit about who you are and why I had to have you here today.
Well, that's a great question. I grew up in Inwood in Upper Manhattan. I went to Good Shepherd School, and I then went to George Washington High School. Unfortunately, my father passed away, and I was relatively young.
Tough at that age.
It is.
You were only like about 12?
Yeah.
Wow.
And basically, I lost control. I dropped out of school. I couldn't find myself. I was arrogant, and I was just
A typical American kid.
typical American kid. And I knew that that I was on the wrong track. And I remember in English, my English teacher telling me that you'll never be anything. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to show you. So I went to the library every day.
Also typical American
Yeah,
kid.
instead of going.
Determination to overcome.
And so what happened is that I knew I was on the wrong track. I dropped out of school, and luckily, because of the Marine Corps' recruiting, I was able to get in. I became a Marine. I spent 6 years overall.
Wow.
4 active and then 2 inactive. And from there, while I was in the Marines, they sent me to college.
Wow. So you got your GED.
GED, then I got 2 years of college.
Wow.
And at that point, after I left the Marines, I went to Wall Street, and then I had a series of business arrangements. But the most important thing is that I really found myself.
Yep.
I was confident.
Yep.
I was willing to take orders, and
Never give up on a kid.
it was never
Ever.
good. And the interesting part is I used what that English teacher, if he's watching today, and he probably is not because of his age, what he said to me about I could not be anything, I was a loser, is the same feel. I used that to motivate me while I was in the Marines.
I hear
When
you.
things got tough, I always remembered that.
I was called into my guidance counselor when I was in high school. The guidance counselor said, "So Vin, what do you want to be?" I said, "I think I want to be a teacher." And he said, "I don't know. Listen, Utica," and that's where I grew up, has like 17 factories. You would be an outrageous foreman. You should go to one of those factories. And I said, I think I'll be a teacher. You know, and I went ahead, and sometimes a step backwards is 2 steps forward.
Right.
And the Marines did that for you.
Yes,
Put
absolutely.
you 2
They
steps
changed
forward.
my life.
Yeah, they changed your life. That's great news. I'm so proud of the Putnam County veterans because they do so much for veterans, and they stand behind them 100%. And we really have to do that.
Yeah.
You know, when someone gives, we have to give. And they do that. This is a great county for veterans.
Right. Well, I think what's happening is that what gave me the emphasis to go back is not only did I go from dropout to PhD.
Oh, God.
So, and I think what happened is they convinced me, the Marines, that there wasn't anything I couldn't do. If I wanted to do it, I had to do it. I had to work at it.
Yeah.
I had to be
But
more
It
diligent than
helps you
anyone
find
else.
your potential.
But it's nice. Plus, another thing was a book that I once wrote at Leslie College became I got an outstanding award for the best thesis written in the
What was the
school.
topic?
Succession planning for family business. And the reason I wrote it was I was inspired to write it because in Sullivan County, there are so many farmers that lose their farms and everything because of lack of planning. What this did was to synthesize all of the needs and the requirements and the understanding in a way that made that book important to somebody that was,
So you were in the financial world.
yes.
Now, in addition to the financial world, you had other interests.
Oh, yes. I always had a social justice sort of feeling. I always stuck up for the person that nobody cared about.
Wow, what a surprise.
So that was always the issue. And that led to the idea of writing a book. And that book was called Justice Served, Babies for Sale.
So you became an advocate for kids.
It was, and that between writing the book and working for CASA, which is court-appointed advocate in the courts and family court, it gave me everything I could want. It gave me exposure to children and to their families to understand what
And
the
to
problem
understand
was.
yourself.
And I got the best teaching from all of this
Yep.
because it allowed me to understand who I was.
Yep.
And allowed me to turn around and give it back
And
to them.
help lost kids find themselves.
Because there's nothing better than seeing a child smile and get reunited with their families, and you get this feeling that you just were able to change the world just a little bit.
That's right. Saving the world one kid at a time.
Right, that's great.
Yep. Yep.
And that's what it was.
Yeah. Now, then you got into another whole branch of your life. You became a writer.
Right,
And this book came about.
right.
And this lady came about.
Oh, yes.
Tell me
lady.
a little bit about your role in all of this, Karen.
Well, I think what happened is I met a dreamer. The ideas that he has are not only about social justice, but they're
About life.
so entertaining. I mean, you know, sometimes whenever you've got a lot on your mind and it's hard to go to sleep, I'll say, Edward, tell me a story. And it just rolls off like water on a duck's back. But he doesn't know how to spell very well. And sometimes he would lapse in, I'd say, is this my man or is this the M&A guy? The M&A is mergers and acquisitions. He was kind of a hired gun for a while.
Wow.
So what a cooperative author does is, first of all, take that you can't see right now, but kind of a stern demeanor, and soften it up and put in like dialogue, help with dialogue,
Yeah.
and do some outrageous things. Like he lets me do the subtitles.
So you were
like
his
Babies
right-hand
for
man.
Sale. I was his right-hand baby.
There you go. Wonderful. And so the two of you began working together.
Right.
And the result was, this is where you hold it up for the camera.
All right.
Edward David Lagarde and Karen Lagarde's Justice Served, Babies for Sale.
Right.
Guys, you had me on the Babies for Sale. Talk to me about the Babies for Sale part of this thing.
Well, Babies for Sale is a fictional account of a young woman who becomes pregnant. Her family turns her out, and she then is in trouble with social services, which then drags her into court. She is facing a judge who's only
Who's not
Body.
necessarily
not
sympathetic.
necessarily is not sympathetic, and therefore, as a result, removes the children, places them in custodial care, and then goes on to a series of events in which the young woman
Right.
is affected by her depression, and therefore, as a result, is not getting medication for it. So they remove her, and the group of them, which is the the attorneys and so on through, remove the children, and then expedite the adoption. And as a result, she commits suicide because of the loss of her children.
Wow. So do you at any point counsel her?
I don't counsel her, but
Your focus is the kids.
my focus is the children. And therefore, as a result, what happens is in this this fictional account is that she loses the child, she commits suicide, and then you'll see that the justice served hero enters in. I'm not going to tell you the ending of the book, but, because we don't disclose who kills who, but he comes in and basically tries to right the wrong that was set
And
against
that's
her.
really what your role is.
My role is
usually.
basically to try to find out why these kids don't follow the rules, why they don't use the system, why they don't have faith in people like myself and many others. I'm a small
Why didn't
part.
you, Edward?
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
And so once that takes place, there's such a wonderful opportunity for them, and yet the big question is why?
Yeah.
Why didn't you do
And
it?
how do you reach these kids?
And that's where
Yep.
there are, I believe, I was talking to Karen about, there are over 300,000 kids in foster care throughout the country.
Wow.
Some-
And some of those situations, some of those situations are very good. There are success stories
Yes.
about kids who were raised in foster homes and did very well for themselves in life. But some fall through the cracks.
But Vinny, if you lose one child, it
right.
doesn't matter about the others.
That's right.
One child is as important as 500,
Yep.
1,000, or whatever.
I say this about this show. People say, how many people watch your show? And I say, I don't know. I don't care if it's one. If that one walks away saying, what a great show, I'm changing my life as of this moment, then the show's a success. We have to reach one person at a time.
Right, and what's good about our book is that if it reaches one person, if it gets one person
Yes.
to stand up and say, you know what, I'm a social worker, I'm going to try to do a little bit more, even though I'm overwhelmed, then we have done something.
Yep.
When I go to sleep at night, I want to go to sleep knowing that I made just a little bit of a change in somebody's life.
Becoming a lifesaver starts with the saving of one life.
Right.
Everything beyond that is gravy.
Right.
And that's what it is. And you have to do that. And you have to believe that what you're doing is essential and important. And what you're doing is. So what you did is you modeled what you saw
Right.
in your profession for this book.
Right.
You turned it into a fictionalized story, and you created a story that we can read to help us understand the situation that these kids are in.
Right. And that's it.
That's enough. That's a lot. Yep.
I wanted to add that it kind of isn't it. What is this, in my opinion, would be great for the big screen, because what he does is this system with the judge, she gets involved and they actually accelerate the adoption procedure and sell the babies to the highest bidder. So that means that there are a bunch of bad guys in here, and what he does is figure out these ingenious, totally entertaining ways for them to get justice served.
So they're
Because
using
they're
kids
doing
to
it
their
in the
advantage.
system. So you see a lot of bad guys in here, and they go down one way or the other, and you're trying to figure out how is it happening. So is it okay if I lift the book back up?
Oh, please do.
When you look at the book and you see this wheelchair, this is Perkins Tower over at Bear Mountain State Park. This is going to tell you that here's a wheelchair about to go over. That'll give you a clue.
That's a great cover, by the way.
Here is a vulture sitting waiting for what might happen when that goes over. So he was ingenious. In fact, running around Sullivan County, he'd go around and say, hey, over to Sherman's, how do I have the brakes go out on a car where a person loses control but nobody knows? Then he goes to the pharmacy. Oh, which drug is it?
Which drug can
that
kill you
they
without
can
anyone
take- And no
knowing?
one knows, you know. So these
Oh,
are
no.
just glorious scenes
Yeah.
where either by an act of God or because they need justice, they lose their life. And they don't get to get away with it within the system.
So, Edward, you are an example of something that I always knew. You know, I was a teacher for 35 years.
I know that.
You know, you look out into the seat, and that's when I was teaching teachers for 5 years. And what I would say to them is, when you look out there, don't see 25 faces. See 25 individual people
Right.
who are going to go in different directions. And what we have to see is not a kid, but the potential.
Right.
Every kid in that seat is a potential. And could be the potential to do almost anything, but it's potential. Here was a kid at 12 years old who could have spent the rest of his life in jail, who could have been dead at 13. Instead, he found the Marines. It could be the Marines, it could be an advocate.
Right.
For every kid in danger, there's someone out there who could possibly save them. And that's what you represent. And in that, I have to say, God bless you, because it's important. And the fact that you have the ability to write a novel and a partner to do it with
Right.
is wonderful, because I am what is called a bibliotherapist. I've written about 12 books. My books are bibliotherapy. I write them to help people see different perspectives, different people with different lives. The Sybil Luddingtons, who are heroes in their own right. And some of them are one-night heroes. Some of them are heroes their entire lives, doing things that we take for granted. What we need to do is see beyond faces. We need to see beyond colors, races, religions. I'm sure that the kids you help, you don't say, okay, well, this one's white, so I'll help this one. This one's black. A kid's a kid.
Right.
I'm sure
Absolutely.
that would
I never looked at a color.
No.
And what I found is that when you work with children, when you try to contribute to their success, you're successful yourself.
And one thing that really caught my ear, when you were talking about you, and you said that at 12 years old when your dad passed, your mother wasn't poor.
No.
She ran a couple restaurants, so wasn't that you were an underprivileged poor kid living in a ghetto?
Hardly not.
No. And so rich kids need help too.
Well, that's true. But the best thing is I never thought of myself as rich or poor. What I thought was I needed to do something that changed
Find
the way
a
my
direction.
life was going.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
a lot of children are like that.
Yeah.
You go
I
to
know.
their homes, there's no one helping them with homework.
Yeah.
Yes, there's no one telling them that it's important to be successful.
And in many cases there are, and they're not listening.
Yeah, that's true.
They're not listening. The kids
Oh,
just
yes.
aren't listening. They don't want to hear it. And fortunately, many kids have a window. And they've got to get to that window in their lives. That moment where they suddenly begin to realize who they are, and what they can be.
Well, it's an interesting thing because I had a case of a young girl who would talk to nobody, and the judge assigned him to me, and I went out and investigated. And at first I met her, and she blew me right off.
Yeah.
So I noticed that she was reading a book. I went out and bought that book, read it. And next time I met with her, I didn't ask her anything because how's that on this chapter? What did you think of that?
Bibliotherapy.
And so from that, we began to have a relationship.
Yep.
Children, the question that we ask in the book, and it's a question that should be answered by all of us, become better parents, is why? Why are we not reaching them?
Yeah, yeah. And sometimes the answer isn't in the neighborhood.
Right.
You have to bring it in from the outside, and books can do that. I mean, that's my very first book was Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye, about a young boy, a wrestler with diabetes. Another book was about a kid with AIDS. Another book was about a kid who had paranormal gifts. He was able to speak to people who have passed. Scary to a kid.
Right.
And there's kids out there who feel that that's where they are. And sometimes we have to bring worlds that don't exist in the neighborhood into the neighborhood. We have to help kids see potential in other places. And sometimes we have to recreate the world,
Right.
which is what you did.
That's what fiction is about.
Yeah, it is what it's about. You recreate the world. When I do writing workshops for high school students, that's what I tell them. I said, in many ways, you need to create the world in 7 days.
But
you know?
just think what it allows you to do. When you write, you have all this energy and imagination
Yes.
that you can put into it.
And passion. And that's what you have.
That's right.
Passion. That's what the show is about. The show is about people and their passions. You have an incredible passion, and you have the ability to see it, to harness it, and to work with it. You're very fortunate to have each other, because sometimes, I mean, my wife is great too, and I have friends who are great, who can bounce off. I do a writer's workshop, and I have about 25 writers who show up just about every week. I actually have about 50, and about 25 of them show up every week, and they bounce their ideas off each other. And they talk about their passions, what they need to say. And I think we all have a purpose here. And finding that purpose is so important when finding that purpose means helping others.
Well,
That's
what's
what you do.
interesting to me was when I lost my first wife to cancer, and that I was gone. I thought my life was over. And I read an article about James Patterson, read some of his books, and so on through. And then I found on the computer he had a course that I took, and he lit my light. He made me feel that writing was a way that I could solve all my problems, because everything could go into it.
Yep.
And then I started believing, okay, yeah, I can write.
Yeah.
And my first few chapters that I gave out to people to read, they were kind. They said,
Yep.
oh, it's wonderful. And I said, no, it's not, but it's a start. And so that's where we went. So
One
all of
thing
the-
that happened with us, you talk about writing together, these characters became part of our life.
Yeah. Real people.
They were. And so what we found was, you all are a bit too young, but we both grew up in the 60s. And I was very active with Title VII, trying to save everything that moved. Blacks, Indians, women, anything that moved, I'm going to save
Gotta
it.
save it.
Well, see, Samantha, who's the lead character, she was in that era, and she was gifted and talented and accepted to go to medical school. But it was sort of like Edward. You know, her father, who was a laborer, was vicariously becoming successful through her. And then she got involved with partying and having a good time and so forth. So it's sort of like that happened a bit to both
Yeah.
of us. We would sit around and talk. We cook breakfast. We're cooks and we have a bed and breakfast. So we'd sit around and talk and meal plan and then talk about the book. And he'd say something about Samantha, and I said, she wouldn't do that. These are like real people. No, she wouldn't do that. She'd say this. Well, then, when he decided that it's just too much, she had depression, which is pretty prevalent, and he writes a lot about that. So he wrote about that. It was too much, and she doesn't make it. We are sobbing. I mean, we're sitting at the breakfast table. Thank God the guests have gone back to their rooms. We're sobbing because this
Yeah.
character that he created,
Yeah.
all of
They
them,
become real
they're real
people.
They're real people.
Well, you
They're
caught
very
my attention with
entertaining.
that. You run a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting because you bring in strangers,
he
basically.
writes about them.
And you
He
get to
takes
meet
little
them.
pieces.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's what it is. One of my favorite places to go to in the world is Ocean City, Maryland. I sit on the boardwalk and I watch
yeah.
all these people go by. Oh my God! Every single one of them is a new chapter.
Right.
You watch their interactions. You watch the kids. You watch the adults. You read their faces. It's absolutely amazing.
That's what he's doing on the next book. We, the bed and breakfast is 5 minutes from West Point. So we get quite a few people. We've even had a commandant, and we have people who were
Wow.
in various wars. So 3 of them recently just happened to have the type of character and personality. And he told them, he said,
Work
well,
perfectly for a book.
you're going to work, you're going to
Wow.
be right in the next
So
book.
that's what you're doing now. That was going to be my question, and you
Right.
beat me to it. Because, believe it or not, we have about a minute and a half left.
Really? Okay.
So you're working on a new book,
On a new book.
and it's going to be based on your bed and breakfast?
No, it's called cheap. It's cheaper to let them die, and it's
Still justice served, it's cheaper to let them die.
Well, it's cheaper to let them die.
And it's about how bureaucrats in Washington remove the benefits from these.
There's bureaucrats
so-
in Washington?
Yes, I know it's revealing. And so what it talks about is them taking away benefits, and this group of people then who have had Agent Orange, and talks all about what has taken place. And it's a murder mystery. That's the interesting
They
part.
meet at our house.
They meet at La Belle Westelle, then they go up to Mackinac Island in Michigan, and we take you all sorts of places to go, and there are a number of murders.
Well, you guys are absolutely fascinating. Your life has been a novel in itself.
Yeah, that's true.
Good luck with what you do. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you for the opportunity.
It's so important. We've got to believe no kid is not worth saving.
Right.
So
That's true.
keep on doing what you do. Keep writing your books. Let us understand the world through your eyes. And thank you for being part of this show today. And let this be a lesson to you. Believe everyone has a reason to be themselves. Help people be all they can be. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of it. Watch the show. Come back again.